Hello and welcome back to First Thoughts. Today we're going to be looking at the second chapter of Doctor Who Series 13 Flux, War of the Sontarans, also written by Chris Chibnall. We last left off with a lot of setup but not too much payoff, though that makes sense since we're still only one episode into this story. But from what we've gathered so far, the Doctor's attempts to discover more about her lost past are put on hold by the destruction of the entire universe. We were introduced to some of the players that are going to be taking part in the rest of the season, including the Sontarans, who get to take center stage here. And right off the bat, I'm just going to say this was a very strong episode. If you had any misgivings about the previous kind of hectic chapter of Flux, I definitely recommend War of the Sontarans. A very strong story, and I'd argue one of Jodie's strongest outings. This is a much more relaxed story compared to the previous one. Instead of focusing on all of the established subplots, we now have three main stories. Though they managed to make it back to Earth and escape the Flux, the Doctor, Yaz and Dan are separated and spread across time and have to deal with the Sontarans' attempt to invade the world. The Doctor and Dan's arcs in this episode are definitely the two that are most connected. Yaz is mostly separate and more focused on the Flux story overall rather than the Sontarans plot. The Doctor is sent back to the Crimean War and joins forces with fairly obscure historical figure Mary Seacole to try and undo the Sontarans' interference with history. Meanwhile, Dan returns to the present only to discover that the Sontarans made it past the Kavista's barrier and are setting up the said time portal, which, if their plan succeeds, means that they can begin their invasion of the past. So Dan has to work with the Kavista to try and prevent their history changing before it's even begun. Meanwhile, Yaz ends up on the planet called Time, where she meets Vinda. The two of them are instructed by a AI system to repair a sentient altar, only for the Swarm and his sister to arrive and begin causing trouble. One of the benefits of this particular episode is the fact that it was allowed to be an hour long rather than about 45 to 50 minutes. It just goes to show how much more longer running time benefits Chibnall as a writer, and I think we're now getting to see the benefits of the 6-part serialized structure as he's able to spread things out more evenly and take his time with certain aspects. None of these stories felt kind of rushed. I'd say Yaz's plot is probably a bit too timey-wimey complicated in terms of the dialogue, but it's the one that we're going to come back to next week, whereas the other two are mostly focused and resolved here. What I will say about Yaz's subplot, which really works, is offering her some much needed character growth and vulnerability that we hadn't really seen before. As well as this, we get to see just how great the Swarm is as a villain. He is so good in terms of performance and dialogue. I was kind of worried that he'd be taking a backseat and wouldn't be really all that interesting outside of his supposed connection to the Doctor, but no, he is a really good villain in his own right, as well as his sister, and I'm looking forward to see them throughout the series. Vinda is not really given much to do here. He's more active than he was last week, but I don't know if he was necessarily needed for this particular episode, as he's mostly there to just give Yaz someone to talk to, but hopefully he'll be allowed to develop as time goes on. Dan's subplot is definitely the most overtly comedic of the three. We get to meet his parents, and they're a fun dynamic, and we get to learn more about how the world has coped with the Sontarans. And it was nice to have the Kavista back. He's a fairly fun character, and I'm glad that he's going to be sticking around. The Doctor's plot is easily the strongest, and I'm just going to say it, this might be Jodie's best performance as the character. Not necessarily her best story overall, but I'm definitely saying this is the most confident and comfortable the Doctor has felt in this incarnation. I've been interested to see a story where the Doctor has been mostly separated from her companions, just to see how much it changes her. And I kind of wonder, based on this episode, whether her more childlike and awkward persona is something she puts on for her friends, sort of like a mask to take away some of the Doctor's more aggressive character traits, which we've seen in other incarnations. She's wanted to be more upbeat and positive, but in doing so has caused more harm than good. That's just my thinking of it, but here Jodie has just felt so confident and comfortable, and nothing that she says felt kind of awkward or forced. There's no real bad jokes, or at least they managed to land here better than certain episodes, and I really enjoy it. I hope we see more of this type of Doctor, and I'm so glad that the smaller TARDIS team has benefited both her and Yaz and given them more of a chance to shine, rather than being sort of lost in the group or being overshadowed by Graham. Now onto the main focus of the story, the Sontarans themselves. And I must say this is definitely one of the strongest outings for them. This is definitely their best New Who story. Overall, the Time Warrior will probably always be their best outing, but this is a lot stronger than their representation in the Moffat era, and even better than the pretty decent job Russell T Davies did with them. Yeah, there are a couple of awkward jokes here, but they're not Strax level of irritating. Some of them are just kind of bizarre, like the leader of the Sontarans really wanting to ride a horse. That's a very random joke, but it's not too distracting. I mean, they're not meant to be a fairly serious race. I think the joke with them is they take themselves too seriously. That's something that Moffat kind of missed, and I'm glad to have that aspect back, and it's cool to see the historical troops going up against the high-tech Sontaran weaponry. I wonder if we're going to be seeing more of them, as from how this particular episode ended, they kind of wrapped up their part in Flux, but since there's a lot more we still need to cover, I'm glad that this particular part is, for now at least, seems to be resolved. It was nice to have Dan Starkey back as the Sontarans. I'm glad he's still playing the Sontarans despite the character change and redesign. Even though I'm not a fan of Strax, he did a pretty good job on Big Finish. Also, Jonathan Watson as the sort of main group of Sontarans also did a pretty good job here. I hope to see him back in future stories. A fairly bizarre moment, which was also present in Chapter 1, was the inclusion of Joseph Williamson, the philanthropist known for his inexplicable tunnels across Liverpool, which had no real purpose. Which is kind of ironic, given that his presence in the story so far has had no real purpose. Especially in this chapter, where he just shows up, briefly interacts with Yaz, and then just disappears. I'm hoping we get to his particular side of the story soon, because I'm not really sure why he's here so far. On the flip side, Mary Seacole did a pretty good job here and was given much more to do, and joins the likes of Ada Lovelace as famous historical characters, which would make pretty good companions. In terms of references I spotted, there was a very overt callback to Lynx, which was nice to hear, and that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this review. I'm looking forward to seeing where Flux is going now, more so than I was with part 1, as we've calmed things down and everything is seeming to be going in a pretty interesting direction. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you thought of War of the Sontarans below, and Flux as a whole. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you next time for Once Upon Time.